Welcome back to the Vires and Numeris podcast, episode number 41 with 3Speak founders Dan Hensley and Matt Starkerz. We talk about a lot over this episode to do with decentralization and the need for social media and all software to be decentralized soon enough. And, the power of taking back the ability to communicate freely over the web and, voice your opinions and earn some crypto in the same right. So we talk about a lot in this episode, but firstly here, before we get into it, let's thank the sponsors of this episode, Cheesecake Swap and Flashcoin, the two sponsors for this week. Oh, and also Short the Banks. Go check out their merch over there. But Cheesecake Swap is an AMM and yield farm aggregator, and Flashcoin is a reinvention of Litecoin, which was built to scale for fast everyday transactions. So go check them out, and always, sport your Short the Banks merch wherever you go. Not an investment advice on any of these products or services, but just some sponsors of the show that we appreciate. So let's get into this week's episode number 41, as I said, with 3Speak founders. They're working on video software or video platform and the ability for everyday users to just be able to upload and have near 100% uptime. A lot of these platforms go down or you're censored or whatever these days, and they're working on alternatives. So let's get into this episode. Welcome back to the Vires and Numeris podcast, episode number 41 with 3Speak co-founders Dan Hensley and Matt Starkerz. Did I say their last name right, Matt?
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, close enough. All right. I appreciate you guys coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate the invite. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm pretty dedicated to this space, and any group of people or individual working on decentralization and the major problems that we're all facing in society, censorship, and the money. We all know about the economic problems. It's a pleasure to talk to people working on those solutions. So let's just get straight into it today. Where did you guys originate? What kind of students were you?
I'll let Matt take that one. Started off.
Student, I guess in terms of the liberty side of things, when I found out about the money system and how that worked about 10 years ago, it just blew my mind as to how incredibly immoral it is. And I started to research different alternatives, and of course Bitcoin was around about that time as well. So just ended up, the rabbit hole went from there, and I've been working on various decentralized projects since. Just in the background, I don't like to take too much of a front role. But Dan, I'm sure is the same. I've looked at so many different protocols, so many different coins over the years, and we've really come to a point where we've understood a lot of the technology that's working in this realm, particularly around anti-censorship and content, and how we protect and make content more censorship resistant. And we're now in a place where we've managed to pick and choose and learn from different projects and different attempts, and we feel that we've got an excellent solution for people who, this solution will guarantee their freedom of speech. And we now can say that we have free speech is a human right as of today online. And so that's, really exciting. I'm really excited to speak a bit more about this as we go through the call.
Absolutely. Before we get into 3Speak and what you guys are building, just what was that moment like for you personally, like the aha moment that, you're sort of living inside the matrix or whatever you want to say, like, there is this sort of oppressive force out there or whatever that, blockchain can solve. Like where were you? Would you remember that sort of moment when you found blockchain? Was it Bitcoin? What was that like?
Well, I kind of bumbled into everything head first. I guess I was sort of like a bubble child in terms of not really being aware of, the monetary policy, inflation, censorship, all of this stuff. I just thought these were cool websites. And then I joined Quora, and I became a top writer, and then I started getting censored, and I was like, oh, this is weird. And YouTube started censoring me, and then I got banned on Twitter. And, I learned about Bitcoin and blockchain, and it just all kind of hit me at once. It was sort of like when you plug into the matrix and you learn everything. I was like, whoa, this is really fucked up what's going on. And it's really crazy how everything is on a shaky foundation. And yeah, it started with Bitcoin, of course, and, like a capped monetary supply that defeats if the bankers or governments want to go wild with inflation. Well, we have a protection. And then I quickly realized, well, coming from a content creator's point of view, I was like, well, Bitcoin is amazing. And we also need to expand this technology into social, into accounts, into content, to where we can take back the power that Web2 has taken from us. Well, they didn't take it from us. We gave it to them, right? They said, hey, we have a platform. You can use it for free. We'll own your account. We'll own your data. We'll literally own everything about you. But hey, we'll let you in the door. That was, as a brain trust, a collective, we did that. But now we're starting to realize how powerful our data is. And they should be, in fact, paying us for all of that information they have. And that's where the revolution started, where I like to say, you own your account, and the sites turn into skins, and they're easily interchangeable, where they're burdened to you and you're not burdened to them.
I like the way you put that. So you found Bitcoin. When did you start getting more interested in like what you can actually build on top of these blockchains, like with smart contracts and overall? How long before you guys started? Once you got your feet into Bitcoin, were you already like were you building anything else at that point in tech, or were you just starting to get interested in tech? Like, how did that play out?
When I first got into Bitcoin, it was in 2016. I was a poker player, and I got in because I wanted to play on a poker site. I'm an ex-professional poker player, by the way. And that's when I first started, and I used the technology, but it planted a seed. I didn't understand it right away. And then 6 months, it started to unfold. And then I'd learned about Bitcoin. And then, once I first bought my first Bitcoin as sort of like, for me, I'm not doing this for, play poker with. Then I quickly went down the rabbit hole, and I immediately wanted to learn about social networks and how this technology can be used. And funny enough, actually, Matt was the one that was there. He invented 3Speak, and I came in later, and we both became co-founders and grew it together. And I was in search of that protocol because, I don't know if you're familiar with Steam, that is now Hive. Well, that's good for text-based data, but we were saying we needed something for video and image. So that's when the idea of trying to find decentralized networks, I hopped on them all. I've been on them all. I actually talked at events for various other ones when I had no skin in the game. I just was there as a proponent of free speech and the technology. Mm-hmm. But once I started to learn more, I realized, well, it's not sustainable. You need to have an incentivized layer which just means you need to pay people to store the files, right? There are no free lunch. That's what Twitter does. They pay to store your data. You need to find a way to, in a decentralized way, pay miners, aka storage providers, to store your data. And that's when the whole rabbit hole with 3Speak. Yep.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm actually pretty familiar with Steam and Steemit. I was on Steemit in 2018. I think I signed up. So I have a little bit of history with like this, what was being built there and like what you guys are trying to work on. So it's pretty cool. That was my next question. You actually just jumped at whether you guys were on Steemit or not. So you've been around that ecosystem for a while then, right?
Yeah, I'll start it off and I'll let Matt finish. We were actually on the front lines of the Steam versus Hive war. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what happened there, but basically there was a Web2 takeover event where Steemit had a pre-mine, and that pre-mine was sold, and then exchanges colluded, and basically it was a token warfare. And, it was the stakeholders versus the centralized entities in the exchanges, and it went on for months, and it was a really big deal, and a lot of people talked about it. I actually had about $1 million worth of Steam tokens stolen from me, from Justin's son. I was one of the bystanders in that event where he froze a bunch of whales accounts using his influence, and that's why tokenomics on stake-based systems is so important, because you're only as decentralized as your token distribution. And Matt and I learned that the hard way, hands-on, and we were actually one of the very first day one apps to transfer over to Hive and to dismiss Steam. But,
so is Hive proof of work?
Hive is the exact same as Steam. It's delegated proof of stake. Okay. Except the only difference is the pre-mine was not transferred over. That was put into a DAO. So there's no pre-mine on Hive. The largest stakeholder has about 3% of the supply. So
This is a beautiful moment in crypto history, in my opinion, because what it is, it's the first demonstration where a centralized corrupt entity came in, used the pre-mine that all these tokens have got. They've all got 20, 30% pre-mine tokens, nearly all of them. And that's a massive vulnerability. So the founder of Steamer Inc. did a deal, sold all of his pre-mine to a Chinese billionaire, Justin Sun, who then came in and essentially centralized the whole blockchain, right? And within like 2 weeks of centralizing the blockchain, he was already censoring content. So we had to go to Hive. It's just, there's no way we can run a free speech system without a decentralized system. So what Hive did is it took everyone's account balances, moved them across. And then with Justin Sun's balance that he was using to centralize the chain, they just basically took that whole thing, zeroed his account on Hive and put all of that money into a decentralized fund called a DAO. And it's just beautiful because it shows that if you are rich in this blockchain technology and you are abusing your community, you will be held to account in forks. The community, the main layer of protection is, where does the community go? What does the community want to do? So the poor people have to believe at least that the rich are investing in their protocol. And if they don't, and certainly if they become abusive, and that perception is understood by the general user base, they will fork the chain and put your balance to zero. And this is a new way to hold abusive rich people to account in non-debt-based economic systems. And this, to me, is incredibly exciting. Hive is putting proof that works, that system has worked. And that's why we're there. One of the reasons, at least.
Super interesting watching this play out. You know, we're like living, you know, I mean, we're like the guinea pigs for like the next, you know, maybe 1,000 years or whatever, basically. Like, I mean, this is like, we're living on the front lines, like you were talking about. This is it.
Bro, I seriously believe that the people who are thinking like you and your audience right now are, that there's few of us and we are a chosen few. Well, I don't know what you believe in, but I mean, the younger people of today are being educated in state schools and the communist regimes, essentially. The older people don't have much to lose. So it really is our generation of people, and the people who understand and believe in liberty at all costs, that we've now got this technology and we have the ability to remove ourselves from the system and live in our own sustainable economies on these blockchain systems, as long as they're decentralized. And the more decentralized they are, the more difficult they are to corrupt. And we can just keep biddling or building, as they say, hodling, hodl, biddling, building. That's what we're doing. We're biddling all the time, man, for as long as we can, to keep bringing this technology out and updating it so that people such as yourselves, as the walls close in this current insane system of economics and politics that we live in, you're going to have these alternatives. And you know, the more that we use them, the more that we build them, the more essentially of a middle finger you're giving to the system, and the more you're taking responsibility for your own liberty, and ultimately we'll be able to diminish the influence and power of the current system, and you know, put your stake, whatever that is, in the land of distribution and decentralization that you want to be in.
I love it. It's really the ascension of private property. I mean, you're talking about these communists. Sure. I mean, they don't respect our property at all. They take everything. They just take. They're inflating away our store of value. You know, the hours we've worked. You know, it's just this is the only way out. We talked about it briefly before we got on here. So you guys are a decentralized application right now on Hive, but when you started talking a little bit more also before we got on here about how you're building your own thing. So can you talk a little bit about that? And like, is there a way for you guys to be blockchain agnostic, or is that something that you're interested in as well? Or can you talk a little bit about what else you're working on?
Yeah, Dan, do you want to?
Yeah, so basically we started with 3Speak, and we just went heads on learning everything we could in terms of how to decentralize, how to take, because we don't want the responsibility. We simply want to be able to give what we call freedom tools and let people allow that. We don't want to be gatekeepers of any kind. And over the years, we've formulated an idea that has come into, you know, it's just gotten simpler and simpler over time. And what we're basically doing is, blockchain is really good for token balance security, account, community list, things that you don't want anybody to mess with. You don't want anybody to ever mess with your token balance. Believe me, it's not fun. You want that permanent. That's what blockchains are really great for. Now, when it comes to content, not to mention blockchains are really great for incentivization. If they're scaled, they can microtip, reward people. They're really great in autonomously rewarding the infrastructure that provides the decentralization for a network to become sustainable. So what we're doing is we're using something called IPFS, which is basically, it's like another level of torrents. If you've heard of BitTorrent, it's peer-to-peer. It's just another evolution of it. It's become a standard, right? So it's just this standard technology that's out there just like torrents, and we're utilizing that using the Hive blockchain to then reward miners, because Hive offers 3 seconds feeless transactions. So that's perfect. You know, on Ethereum, it costs $50 a transaction. We believe in sectioning these things out, niching these things out, meaning, okay, blockchain is good for this. Let's remove the content, put it on IPFS. We don't need to put everything. It's like the body having one organ. That doesn't make sense. You don't have a God organ. You have organs that do separate things. And that's what your tech stack should be. You shouldn't try to lump everything into one tech stack. Blockchain does a certain thing very well. We're going to now utilize IPFS. And now, yes, it becomes blockchain agnostic, where you could post using an Ethereum address, post using a Bitcoin address. Using the IPFS. Yeah,
we have the ability to tip at least in Ethereum and Wax and Bitcoin at the moment.
And awesome. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
The power this brings right now, which works right now, is you can log on, download this desktop app, and in one click, you have an IPFS node that's yours, you're self-hosting, and you can put that content out there no matter what. No one can stop you. You're self-hosting, you're broadcasting to the world. That works right now. Now the next step is for people who can't self-host. Maybe you're in a country where you don't have the resources, or you're on a mobile phone, whatnot. Now we're going to say, okay, well, just like when Airbnb said, hey, you can now rent your bedroom out, everyone became mini hotels. It's the same thing, where if you make it easy for your hard drive space to make you a few bucks, everyone now has become a data center, because hard drives getting cheaper and cheaper, and 100 gigabyte hard drive is common nowadays. So, you know, that's sort of the idea.
Now, can I just add to that? To compare this to Facebook or YouTube, for example, right? They run with a centralized set of infrastructure. So what do they need? They need storage. They need content delivery. They need encoding for the content, especially if it's video. They need a centralized distribution system and a centralized monetization system, right? That's all controlled by, oh, and by the way, most importantly, a centralized account system, right? So all that is controlled by YouTube. And as a result, they have full control over your life, right? If you're on that platform, you're making your money on that platform, you are to their beck and call, right? Anything, and you see, it's so disempowering and kind of pathetic, yeah? These successful content creators who are now essentially controlled opposition, they're very proud, and of course, fair play to them. They've done a great job, but a lot of them have to button their mouth. They have to be very careful what they say, because they know if they say one thing wrong, they're going to get disappeared, right? And it's effectively the same as sending you to a gulag back in the 1920s, right? It's like once they deperson you, you're gone, and you're in a very difficult situation. You lose your followers, you lose your community that you've built, your content, your history, your means to become self-sufficient within the system to an extent. So what this technology does is it first of all fundamentally removes the account layer, removes the account system from a centralized entity. So YouTube has the keys to your account, and you are therefore YouTube's bitch, right? Whether you like it or not. On this technology, the account layer is stored and distributed on a decentralized blockchain layer. So the infrastructure that's run to run that account system is decentralized, and there is no CEO, there is no entity, there is no corporation or company backing that. The only thing that there is a community of peers who run the technology in a decentralized, distributed way to make sure that account system stays up and independent from any centralized entity. So as a result, the platforms are then built on top of that, but the platforms can't control your account. They can't take your accounts. They can't take your followers. They can't take your community away from you. They can't take your money away from you, and they can't take your content away from you. Effectively, the platforms now become funnels through which to display your content. And then they can also regulate, what type of content they display, but they cannot delete your account, right? And this is fundamental, and it turns the table upside down. And then on top of that, all the other infrastructure I mentioned before, the idea is that it's all run centralized by YouTube and Facebook, right? Mm-hmm. With this system, it's all done as a peer. You become a peer in the network. So you can run your own content delivery network. You can run your own encoder node. You can run your own storage node. And then you can share that information with all your peers, your friends and colleagues, and the people, members of your community, so that we are built out of the system. It relies on the individuals within the communities in the system to run the infrastructure. And then we're currently building on top of that a distributed incentive layer that allows people to receive rewards for providing that valuable infrastructure to the community. And this is where the whole table gets turned upside down. Because now you can have content creator tokens, right? Where content creators have immutable communities that once they build their 1 million follower community, no one can ever delete it. And then you have a token system backing that. So now you have these, effectively, you could call them sovereign or independent communities that exist outside the system. We're deciding whether to call them speak hubs or whether to call them breakaway communities, but whatever we end up calling them, or the community calls them, they are independent communities, and they will become kind of like sovereign, their own kind of digital sovereign nations, where a content creator has a huge community and these people have an economy backing them that is sustainable. We could talk about maybe later how it becomes sustainable. But I envisage a future where governments will have to recognize these entities, these communities, that they're very difficult to hold down because they're made up of groups of people. There's no centralized entity behind them. They have their own token economies that are sustainable. And as a result, they will grow. They will grow over time. We're building growth mechanisms into these things. And I believe that governments of the future will have to, they will lose power, and the communities will have to be recognized by governments. They'll become that powerful, because when you have a large content creator with 100,000, 1 million followers, this is the size of a small economy. It's the size of a small country, you know? And that's where we're going. And it helps to distribute power. It helps to distribute influence across the world. And that's where we believe that we need to go to get away from this centralized censorship-based system that we currently live in.
Yeah, you guys talked about a lot there to unpack, but you know, let's say today more than ever, I mean, look at the president that just came out of the, you know, office in the United States. I mean, your presence online and you know, your visibility is like everything, you know, today. Your network is your net worth or whatever. It's like they can take that away from you in all of these places like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and they basically disappear you in a way. It's just like, so these solutions are paramount to freedom, really. I mean,
the other paramount solution to this, just to say really quickly, because the data is distributed, it's stored by the peers in the network, and a lot of those videos will have permanent storage as well, because they have enough money backing them, because the community want to make sure they've got permanent storage so that history can't be changed, right? And what you have then is you have a distributed system that everyone can access. So all of the platforms built on this protocol, 3Speak is the first one, but there's going to be many others. They will all be able to access this data publicly. So effectively, you have a network effect, where at the moment they want everyone on their own Telegram channels, or they want to silo people onto their own websites and then reduce their SEO so they don't come up in search results, right? So over time, they silo them away into obscurity. This will enable, once multiple platforms are built on top, this will enable the platforms to pull all of this data to their front ends and display them. And so as a result, when you post a video to 3Speak, for example, you will be able to, that video will automatically be displayed on, you know, hopefully 15 other platforms that have all got their own network effects and all got their own communities that are growing. They're all going to be working to grow those communities. So it's like the potential for network effects is huge here. And the platforms that integrate this technology they'll have to do none of the work that we've done. We're giving all of this away for free. All the tools, all the tokenization, the distribution storage, the incentivization layer, we're giving it all away for free so that those guys can then integrate that into their platforms with very little input. And as a result, you know, platforms now can actually exist in Web3 with very little dev time and resources applied to themselves.
So you can basically plug this into any blockchain. Is that what you're saying? Or you
can plug this into any platform. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So what do you think? What do you guys think that what do you believe the holdup is? Because, you know, I think I signed up for Steemit in 2018. Or is the average person just finding out about blockchain now? So we have another 5 years to build this thing. You got, you know, for example, things like you're building that, you know, DApps or these sort of things that take a little bit more knowledge. Are we just waiting now? Is this like just you guys build it and they come? Is that what it is, or what do you think?
So I'll hop on that first.
Yeah.
So where I think we're at is there's a big transition, and a lot of people have grown very comfortable with what we call Web 2, which is, easy sign up. They handle everything for you,
Right.
no problem. If you lose your password, it's fine. You get it back, all of that stuff. And we've moved to radical technology that's very raw, that's independent, that's not backed by big billionaires. So it's really just a community tinkering around, a lot of hobbyists, a lot of people who are working just because they find a passion for it. And we are coming to a place where it's slowly then suddenly we're starting to see, okay, well, for example, I am on Hive because my Twitter was banned. I had a growing audience. I was getting millions of views a month on my Twitter. It was, I was mentioned in an article that went viral, and they mentioned my Twitter name, and and that was over a year ago. I did an appeal, nothing, didn't hear back. Got a vague answer eventually. So for me, it's become paramount. Like, I've already been disappeared, I guess you can say. I'm mini, so it wasn't a big blip, and you don't hear about the mini blips like we have. So I think what you're seeing is people like me who are getting, just fed up. And then what you're going to see is it's clamping down, right? Like, little by little, you're starting to see, oh, he was radical. And it's like, oh, well, that person wasn't that radical. And now they're like, well, I'm confused. It must be a mistake. And now we're in that I'm confused, it must be a mistake part, denial. And because Web 2 doesn't scale, it's one entity storing all the data forever. Well, that doesn't scale, and that's not a good business model. And a lot of this data isn't bringing ad dollars. So it's in their favor to start censoring people and deleting them just out of a business model. It's like, look, you have horrible content in our eyes. Our ad, people hate it. You bring nothing of value to us. So it's not even so much of it like being this Orwellian thing, which it is, but like just from a practicality, common sense, it just makes sense to like not store everybody's data, especially if it doesn't bring you ad dollars. So we're going to see this escalate to where, Web 2 just doesn't scale. And we're seeing Web 2 or, YouTube and all these sites go down periodically when they used to never do that. And now, this is starting to happen every once in a while. Now it's starting to happen, I think, every, once a month, one of these big things goes down for a little bit or is hacked. So we're starting to see the tinkering and the aging of these giant behemoths that are very top heavy. The good thing about these grassroots organizations is they're not top heavy. There's no CEO that's a billionaire. That means that CEO had to extract $1 billion out of that ecosystem and no one else got it, just that person. Right. That doesn't exist on these grassroots levels. That all goes back to the community. So there is no bigger they are, the harder they fall. We've already fallen. We're all mini ants carrying our load to a bigger pile. So it's just a completely different fundamental. So I just think what's going to happen in the next 5 years is you're going to see an implosion of Web 2, and they're going to scramble to make themselves quote unquote decentralized. You see Twitter talking about this, although we've talked to Blue Sky and they're not interested in an incentive layer. Well, that's curious. If they don't want an incentive layer, I mean, they don't want people to be rewarded for storing. That means they're saying, well, we'll store it for you. Don't worry. We'll store it for you, and you can store it too, right? You can do it for free, but no one's going to do that. So it's just going to be the same old. They're just repainting centralization with decentralization over it, but it's not. So,
could I just add to this, Dan? Just a side note. The beauty of this system is, right, like Dan's saying, it's imploding. Why? Because they're going to want to have their own tokens. Jack Dorsey with Blue Sky is already talking about his own decentralized social media protocol, which is an exact description of Hive, by the way. Hive's already 5 years old. The technology is already 5 years old, but he's going to try and claim it for himself, right? But the thing is, like Dan says, you can't tokenize it. So what do you have? Why can't they tokenize it? Because they are centralized entities who can be pursued by the authorities. So they have to be incredibly careful about how they tokenize their ecosystems because they are going to be classed as securities immediately. Whereas how can you sue a community, a distributed community? You can't touch it. So as a result, as long as we make sure that the technologies that we release are released via a set of peers in a community, open source, so everyone can copy and paste it, all for free, then it's basically impossible to call it a security. As long as we take none of the token, we don't do anything kind of that gives us an unfair advantage, we compete with everyone else for the token in the mining process, then boom, you've got this very difficult to touch decentralized protocol that can release tokens for people that Web 2, i.e. Facebook, Twitter, just cannot compete with. They cannot do that. And also, Dan talked about the security. Our app went down the other day on the centralized side, the centralized web app, but we have a desktop app that runs locally on your computer. And that carried on running because all it does is it ties into the distributed peer network and continuously pulls data to it, and then you can upload to it as well. So you don't need our centralized system, if it goes down, to upload to the network and receive rewards. So it's done. It's absolutely beautiful. And this is the principle, is that we can allow now people to survive and stay up and keep their content up outside the system without the possibility of them being chased by authorities and all these types of things, to shut them down.
Yeah, the idea that you could have nearly 100% uptime is like also pivotal. So that's pretty cool that you can run it locally like that.
What this technology does, it helps people to stay online, for sure.
Yeah. Could you tell us like a little bit more about the token? I mean, I think that you just described basically the Howey test or whatever it is. Like if you that's one of the things that they talk about. I think maybe, not taking any of the tokens would be definitely clear you guys in that regard. I think the people that get in trouble are the ones that launch and, they take a big distribution of the tokens or whatever. But can you tell us, like, is that token like a concurrent thing, or I don't know how to say it. Like you have the Hive. Are you going to be working just in your Speak token, or is Hive going to be like running on your platform as well? How is all that going to work? I don't know if I understand that part.
Let me take that.
Do you want to say this, Dan? Yeah.
All right. So Hive is going to be the database in which we store the information that runs the Speak network. So Hive is sort of like a universal broadcasting database that's immutable, which we need. We can't have people changing the infrastructure. Now, when you get into the token system, at first it's quite complex in terms of there's a lot of nuances to it, and there's a lot of reasons for each layer. So essentially what you could say is there's 3 tokens. There is a miner token, which you need to stake in order to actually mine Speak. Speak is the capped governance token, and the governance is over inflation levels and control over the network. However, the token system will live on Hive in terms of we'll first be on a DPoS blockchain basically, which means that it's going to be censorship resistant and all that stuff. You can't be hard forked from the Speak network. The Speak network consensus has no say over token balances basically. It's just a governance token over what happens on the Speak network. And then you stake Speak in order to get Braca, which is the 3rd token, which is sort of like, if you know Neo, it's a gas token. In order to upload, it's more of spam control. So I upload, I need a little bit of Braca in order to do so. That Braca then pays the miners. So it gives you a sense of feeless in terms of if you hold a little Speak, you get Braca for free. Therefore, as an investment, you could power up a little bit of Speak, and therefore you get free uploads essentially if you have enough uploaded. And each 3 of those it happens for a reason. I don't know. I'll let Matt jump in if he has anything to say, because it can get long-winded.
Yeah, it can get quite detailed, and the details are in our light paper. And we're currently producing a white paper in the next few months. But yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I guess. Effectively, the bracket, you receive Braca if you are one of the peer miners, and anyone can be a peer miner. You can basically run a storage node that helps store other people's videos. You can run an encoder node that helps people encode that can't encode very quickly. You can run a CDN, a content delivery network that improves the quality of the final product to the viewers. And all that will basically be done automated. We're currently building a set of nodes that people will download and then just run on their local computers, on their local servers. And what happens is basically, as a user who's uploading, you can upload for free, you can store it to your own node and basically get a completely free service because you're providing the infrastructure yourself to the network. But if you want an improved service, so if you want a high quality delivery to the final user, if you want long-term storage that doesn't rely on your own servers and relies on several other people's servers to get your content up and distributed, you do well to pay a little bit of bracket to the miners, to the people providing the infrastructure to do that. And like Dan says, you've got the capped governance token, which is like the Bitcoin model on Speak. That allows you to have influence in the network. So the more Speak that you have, and you can also mine Speak by providing infrastructure to the network, or you can buy it, obviously. Then the more influence you have over the network, and that's going to be a capped supply over a number of years, just like Bitcoin.
Have you
and so it become very scarce.
Have you guys determined the number? Have you guys picked a number yet?
More or less, yeah. We've had a chat about it, but to us, the number is important in terms of how it looks and stuff. But to us at the moment, we're still kind of getting the infrastructure built and everything like that. But the number is kind of going to come out in the wash at the end. Yeah. But it'll be a large cap token for a low price initial price. But the basically, so you need to have Speak in order to get Bryer every day in order to continue to upload, and then you need to have the miner token. So if you're providing infrastructure, you need to stake the miner token into the network, because it shows legitimacy to start off with. And the miner tokens are effectively the same equivalents as a mining rig in reality. So you don't need to have a mining rig to operate in this network. You can have physical infrastructure or rented infrastructure. But the idea is that with these miner tokens, you will be able to stake them, and they become the digital equivalent of a mining rig. And every year we will release new mining tokens that improves the efficiency relative to the previous year's miner tokens. And then, it gets pretty deep, but the payments for those miner tokens go into a DeFi pool. And the DeFi pool then is ever expanding, because no one ever takes that money out. Once the payments are made in for the tokens, and also we do it with advertising as well, you get a DeFi pool that's ever increasing, that's providing liquidity to the network. Mm-hmm. And then the fees from that DeFi pool distribute to the infrastructure providers and various other projects that we're trying to run to improve the Speak network. So it becomes a sustainable based pool that people are continuously paying into for services, and the DeFi fees that come out the top of that pool go to the infrastructure providers and the value creators in the network. So we have a sustainable long-term model that never shrinks, because it will always increase, because there's constant payments being made into the DeFi pool. We call this is really, we haven't seen this before, it's novel. It's called a SIP, service infrastructure pool, because you're effectively providing digital services into a DeFi pool. And then instead of the DeFi pools just being used to reward the stakers, people will also be able to stake to the DeFi pool, those fees will also, that are not backed by stakers but are backed by people paying into the pool, will then go to the valuable members of the community for providing infrastructure. So it becomes a sustainable model. And it's not just applicable to video. This is going to be copyable and applicable to all sorts of things. We want to get to the point where these individual breakaway communities, they all are also backed with their own SIPs and their own tokens that have got providing liquidity to the ecosystem, to their own individual ecosystems. That's a bit further down the line, but that's where this is going.
This is something I've been writing about and interested in for like a really long time. So I love hearing that you guys are working on this. I'm also reading Life After Google right now by George Gilder. I don't know how you say it. Gilder. I don't know if you guys have read that, but he talks about like how everyone just like is what, basically what we're having this conversation about, the willingness of like the normal person, just the average Joe, just to like give up their data. And they think, he talks in there about how people think that the cloud is like, the Google cloud is actually like in the ether, they don't even like know that there's these huge, mining, farming our data, these places. It's crazy what's going on, and people have no idea. So
I just want to add to this here, like when you're taking back your digital sovereignty from this system, right? It's the same as like saying, well, I'm going to go and grow my own food effectively. You can't just go and buy a place out or rent a place out in the country and then expect the food to grow itself. You have to put the work in, right? You have to, if you want your freedom ain't free, You've got to work at it. So this is one of the negatives of this, if you want to call it that, is that Web 2, the centralized Web 2, it's very convenient and easy, because they do it all for you, but in exchange you give away your life, and now you're their bitch, right? If you don't want to be their bitch, you have to actually take self-responsibility, and things like your keys that you get from these systems, from these blockchain accounts, right? They are your keys, they are your life. And if you lose them, you lose your money, you lose your history, you lose basically everything. But by giving you the keys, instead of Facebook having to manage them for you like a little baby, now you've got the keys yourself, and you've got to take responsibility for them, right? Then the same with the content. If you're storing people's content, you have to be responsible for that content. So it's a more active involvement, and this is probably why it hasn't taken off 4 years ago, because it is more involved. But how much do you want to? Do you want to live in this system as these guys bitch as they become more and more powerful, or do you want to do a little bit more work, do a little bit more research, make connections with people who live outside the system, make connections with people who don't necessarily politically agree with the system, whether it's right or left or center or whatever it is, right? There's lots of people out there that don't agree with what's happening. And this technology will be, because to us, the fundamental part of all of this is free speech, right? So politically, Dan and I are very careful not to get political online, because our politics online is free speech. And then we trust the rest of you to go discuss these things on these free speech systems so that you can, and trust that the public can educate itself and make the best decision for itself, instead of giving these decisions to centralized, muddied interests that have got conflicts of interest left, right, and center. Yeah. So this gives people the ability to do that.
Let the conversations be had. That's all we want.
Yeah.
Let us have these conversations. We don't, like you said, we don't need you to treat us like children. We can make decisions on our own. And you can see it more and more. I mean, it's obvious, more obvious than ever, that there's definitely some overlord is making these decisions on what we can and can't engage in, so it's
they don't know what's going to hit. I swear to God, they don't know what's going to hit them. They've got no idea.
I totally agree with you, because I think we're going to decentralize law, and I think courts and everything. There's just no reason that we need to be living in this type of society anymore.
Well, Dan Larimer, the guy that created DPoS technology, he's quite famous in our circles for saying this technology, I don't know the exact quote, but so sorry, Dan, if you're listening, but basically this technology will remove government from conflict resolution, right? The conflicts will be had between the chains. There will be blockchain wars happening between the chains. That's happened between Hive and Tron with Justin Sun, as we spoke about. And the code built into the chains will be run because the community wants it run. And the code then dictates effectively the value transfer, effectively the basic laws within the community. And every blockchain system will have its own customized laws and code to suit the ideology of the people in that ecosystem. And may the best ecosystems win. And the thing that I love about this is it guarantees that there will be multiple ecosystems out there that you can go join, and you'll become effectively a digital citizen of these ecosystems. There is no centralized governance behind them. You want to do your research and work out which ones are decentralized, which ones of the owners gave themselves a shit ton of tokens and then are now dumping those tokens on their community. And you'll find out over time which ones suit you best. And it's an alternative, man. It's an alternative.
It's exactly why I'm so anti-maximalist. It's like you're giving up one cult for another one. Like, let's see the real. This space is all about competition. It was born out of competition. Why would you want to limit choice? Like, let's see what else we can build. Let's make everybody build better, or build.
Not build back better. Fuck that shit.
No, build better.
Yeah. But the just to say one more thing. Effectively the decentralized account system here really does give people digital sovereignty, and it takes the power to regulate away from the community running this system. And it's so freaking important to the future of freedom on the globe. Yeah. And I'm just so glad. To me, we can all feel the walls closing in, right? And if I didn't have this in my life right now, I don't know what I'd be doing, right? But because this is here, there is a massive light at the end of the tunnel, and all we've got to do is biddle it, and it's happening. The idea's out there. Even if Dan and I disappeared tomorrow because the state disappeared us or whatever, it would make zero difference to any of this stuff, because we've issued the documents, we've got the people working on it, they all know what they're doing. If they don't complete it, the ideas are out there and they are being built.
I think that's the important thing, is that we're distributing the ideas. Like
yes.
Yeah, you'll never hear me say build back better. I think that one's a UK one. But I'm not along that ethos either. You can trust in that. I just have a couple more questions for you guys before we get off here. What are your overall aspirations? Obviously, it's freedom. I can already tell. But where do you see us in 10 years? This whole space. Are we gonna? I think it's almost 100. It's a certainty now that we're gonna pass up the gold market cap with Bitcoin. Smart contracts are here to stay. Where do you see? I think Facebook is already on the decline. I don't know. Millennials really aren't on there anymore as much. I think that we have a really good chance with things like what you guys are building. Hive overall, all these decentralized applications. Do you think that in the next decade we really, can make that huge leap or whatever towards like more decentralization? Like the average person that watches television, are they going to be using what you're building here in a few years? Like, do you think we can really bring those people along? Is it inevitable, like that everybody is eventually going to make this leap, or will the Web 2.0 still have a pretty prominent hold over everything, in your opinion? You guys can both answer this if you want.
You want to take it first, Dan?
Yeah, sure. So I see, let's say in 12 years, so the Web 2 business model is going to die out. It's going to reinvent itself as decentralized, quote unquote. And I think in 12 years, you're still going to have a mixture of projects that have been taken over from within, meaning they have pre-mines that are bought, and it's sort of like, well, the giant hasn't stepped on us yet, so we shouldn't move. You're going to have a lot of those sort of civilizations online where they know they have an overlord, but they're fine with it because the status quo is okay. And then you're going to have true decentralized projects such as Bitcoin and Hive. And I believe what these blockchains are going to do is they're going to communicate with each other, right? You have Bitcoin, that's like the pure, solid, very, very unicorn store value. You're not going to replicate that. And now you want to build things on top, outside of it. But those things that live outside of Bitcoin have to stand on their own 2 feet, right? Lightning Network doesn't rely on Bitcoin security. It does at the final checkpoint when you actually put it to chain. But everything outside is actually peer-to-peer and can be attacked. So you have to have something that is a sort of a trade-off. And I see sort of like voting stake-based systems becoming very, very prominent, where you have sort of a share in the overall ecosystem, where nobody has a majority rule. And then, as you start to peer off, let's say 20 years, you're going to have the exhaustion of Web 2, because you have a centralized point of failure, you have centralized point of funds. Therefore, they're going to exhaust, because the difference between centralization and decentralization is, you have one big bear in the centralization that has to carry everything. Well, it gets tired. Where with decentralization, it's 1,000 ants, and we're all helping as one. And if a couple of us get wiped out, it's fine. We keep marching. No one ant gets too tired. And that's sort of how I see it. It's just going to be a death by 1,000 nails. They can't really keep up, and they're going to exhaust. And then decentralization is just going to take over, just because it's cutthroat. There's no CEOs. It's always at cost. It's always going to be the cheapest. There's no middle person. You can't compete. There's no business model for centralization to actually stand upon. So it's just going to dissolve, in my opinion, just out of natural forces.
I like the bear ant analogy. Go ahead, Matt. What do you have to say?
Well, you see this we mentioned it before, but Jack Dorsey and Blue Sky, right? He's basically, we did a meme recently where he spoke about Blue Sky in Congress, and he described Hive to a T. And we know that he knows about Hive, right? Because Blue Skies have approached us and spoken to us from time to time, and it's not gone anywhere. And now all of a sudden, Jack Dorsey's effectively talking about Hive. Why? Exactly the reason that Dan just said, right? These people are seeing the ship sinking. This guy is the biggest censor in history, right? And he's censored a sitting US president. Now, whether I agree with the president or not is irrelevant. I don't agree with people being censored, and I will fight to the death for your right to speak, right? This is a value that we used to have in the West, yeah? Well, this technology enforces that. But Jack Dorsey's trying to jump on that train and move across and say, well, I've built this decentralized protocol now. Come on, man. You're trying to save face. So this is happening, like Dan said. The other angle I'd like to consider. Mm-hmm. You just showed me.
I was going to show the where you talk about the free speech in here, right? And
man, like these all principles all come from these principles that our ethos is in those quotes, for sure, and I hope other people can adopt that ethos as well, because freedom really is important, man. It's a precious jewel, and a lot of people in our history fought for it and died for it, and we've just given it away in the last year. But basically, I just want to come on to the way I see this going short term. Mm-hmm. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure. I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be super tough. The movie that we're playing out is going to be interesting for sure. It's always going to take the most interesting route. I know Dan likes to say that. But this light at the end of the tunnel is here. People are going to start establishing contacts locally so they can trade out of their cryptocurrency into this fiat bullshit shitcoin currency, so they can operate their lives with transactions outside the system. that's what you got to do. You got to set your life up so you can live outside the system. If you can, grow your own food. If you can, find your own lawyers that will support your cases. If you can, join together with people to fund your own lawyers so you can get lawyers for cheaper. If you can, find your own medical people that haven't been corrupted by this crazy medical system. These things are all possible. But you've got to want it. You've got to want it. And then lastly, people will start to set up their own digital identities online. I think people will have a public identity and an anonymous identity. And they will operate on these distributed systems that guarantee their free speech, their freedom to transact, their freedom to store data. And basically what you'll have then, you're going to have two factions of society where you have the people who comply through convenience mostly, and they're going to live their lives nice and simple and easy in the system that gives them, and they're not going to be persecuted or anything like this. You're going to have the people that stand up for freedom. That's where this is going. It goes straight to, they're starting off with white supremacists and all this type of stuff. But as time goes on, you know where it's going. It's going to the people who love freedom, right? That's where this is going.
100%. I just saw today that in the United States, they're like, the Patriot Act is being rebuilt already. Like, we all knew it was gonna be turned on the American citizens eventually.
Do they think we are stupid? Do they think we're stupid? Like, gee. So well, here's the thing. Not only are we stupid, we've just built a system that just removes them. Yeah. Sorry, if you were better, you'd have lasted longer. But you guys are idiots. You've just incentivized people who get pissed off very easily, like myself and many others of us, to go build a system that removes you without shooting a freaking shot. Yeah, done. Sorry, it's just a matter of time, right? So it's going to be tough, no doubt about it. You're going to have to set up systems so you can live outside the system, but do it. Go do it. The earlier you do this, the more you're going to be free later, and the quicker it's going to happen. And so over time, what you're going to have, I think, the way this is going to fall to pieces is, it's going to be a long time, and I think there's going to be people living comfortable lives in the current system, complying, doing what they're told, getting their jobs, all that stuff. And then as time goes on, they're going to start to see the people using the systems, and I'm not necessarily saying it's the Speak Network or 3Speak, but the systems that people like Dan and I have built and are building, and they're going to see, hold on a minute, these guys don't have to get jabbed every 6 months if they don't want to. These guys have got their own medical system set up. These guys they've got their own, there's going to be citadels. I firmly believe governments are going to recognize content creators who've got large communities because they're going to have their own economies backing them. And they're going to be more sound economies than the shit toilet paper that the government's prints, right? Yeah. So it's going to get embarrassing for them. I believe at some point they're going to have to come across and start talking and saying, well, how the hell do we exist in this place? But until then, it's going to be difficult. And then what's going to happen is the people in Web 2 and in the centralized nature of things who are living for convenience, they're going to start to see the people who have their sovereignty and their freedom existing outside the system and being able to say no to the system. And over time, it'll slowly collapse like that. And like Dan says, maybe 20 years from now, you'll see the end of Web 2. And we are that generation of people. And I see this as an ideological, psychological war. And I think we are in the thick of it right now. Our grandparents went through World War II to fight for similar values, apparently. Well, I think we are the people that are going to have to do that in our generation, and maybe even our kids. But yeah. I'm here, and I want to make sure these guys don't get their system. They aren't going to get their system, and it's already over. It's already over. The technology's out. There's nothing they can do about it. All they got to do now is damage control.
I tend to agree with you. I think the genie's out of the bottle. We're fighting the intellectual fight that, they fought in World War II, like you mentioned, with guns and tanks. And today, like you said, like once Satoshi, and you make a lot of good points, pseudonymous, he's a pseudonymous creator of, or the group of Bitcoin, and like the world is flocking to this currency and store value, whatever it is to you. It's different things to me. It's not just one thing. It's different things. Yep. So, and it doesn't have to be one thing.
The other thing that's special, like Dan said, it's a unicorn, right? And when he says that, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think it's important to mention, Bitcoin was created as a fair system. Satoshi didn't give himself millions of tokens. He mined them at the same time that he released it to the community and gave everyone else the opportunity to mine it. That doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else mined it straight away, but that's not the point. It's the fair release. And
the fair launch.
This is something the fair launch. This is something that so many tokens have failed on because greed gets the best of people, and it's got the best of so many of these coins. And it's a shame because the technologies are great, but sorry, you're going to have trouble later. And certainly if people start to realize what a fair launch is and how you can fairly compete against other people in the network to mine those governance tokens, then they're going to see these other chains that they're just, you can't do that on them. And so it's very important for us to release this as a fair launch. The other thing I want to say just briefly is IP is becoming valueless, right? More and more computers are building the IP as well. And as we open source IP, it becomes valueless, right? Once the IP is open source, you can copy and paste it as many times as you like. You can replicate it, you put your own logo on it and use it. Mm-hmm. What's going to become valuable is the ability to influence the direction of these communities within reason. Because if you influence them in a negative way, they will just fork away from you and go create their own new system. But if you have the ability to influence, i.e. by accumulating governance tokens, by providing, as long as those governance tokens are accumulated, by providing value to those networks, that's where the value is right in the future. It's how many of these governance tokens have you accumulated through fair means? And, do the community perceive you as having accumulated them through fair means? Do the community perceive you as providing value with those tokens back to the community? And then once you have that, that is incredibly valuable. It's like gold dust in my opinion, especially if the governance tokens are capped. And that's where this is going. The IP is getting cheaper and less. It's accumulating less value, and the governance token is what's going to. And here's the thing: if you get a centralized entity like a government that wants to come in and disrupt a chain by holding a shit ton of the tokens on a proof of stake, for example, mm-hmm. they will have to make. As long as no one sells out to them, and as long as no one has a significantly large supply of the token, then they will have to buy those tokens on the open market and push the price up, make everyone rich. Everyone will say, thank you very much. And then they'll fork the chain to another place and go exist over there, right? So it's just incredibly hard to defeat this model. And it's been proven in the Hive Tron War. It's there. The foundations are there, man. And we have this light at the end of the tunnel that we're racing towards. And I'm super excited about it.
I am too. I'm super bullish on what you guys are working on, all the decentralization projects. I'm huge on privacy coins. I think privacy coins are going to be monstrous as this decade unravels too. And people, that's going to be like.
Can I just have a little pop on privacy coins? So yes, I agree. They are going to be massively important. However, there has to be a way within privacy coins again to hold the rich to account. So this is where you have the problem. You have to have the transparency so you can see what the rich are doing with their tokens, and you can then go identify them and zero them if they fuck around, right? So there is going to be a coexistence, in my opinion, of privacy coins and open blockchains. We are building open blockchains and open tokenomic systems such that the rich can be held to account if they start abusing. So there's going to be a bit of both of them. But so people who are looking to put their wealth into, they think they're going to just put their whole wealth into a privacy coin. It doesn't work like that, because once you do that, you give away your ability to hold the large accounts to account because you can't see them.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about. Wait, that's a whole other conversation. But I agree with you. I agree with you on some part of that. Yeah, we're going to utilize different things for different blockchains for different purposes.
For sure, 100%.
I got one last question for you guys. I could talk to you guys all day. I'm sure we have a lot in common. We've talked about a lot of this. It's kind of the same, but I always wrap up the show at the end. I always ask what Bitcoin means to you. And then what your project means to you. You guys obviously both want to go on this one, probably.
Yeah. Bitcoin to me, basically, it's a freedom tool. It's the ultimate freedom tool. It's the stepping stone I wouldn't say stepping stone. It's the path that can change how. Because governments are just mobs, in my opinion. They have the ability to print fake money, and they can pay people to then cause violence to the peaceful citizens. And Bitcoin takes that power away, and that's a fundamental stop. Like, you have to stop the bleeding. That's like stopping the bleeding. Boom. And now we can build anew. And then you build out side chains. That's why I sort of look at our project is, if you compare it to, in reference to Bitcoin, it's going to be a side chain like Lightning Network, where you can send your Bitcoin back and forth on this network for cheap, right? You can do it a little, you can do a lot, however you want. And this can really inject Bitcoin into, Venezuela and all these other countries where they can't afford the fees. And I just want to, I see Bitcoin being the bull that's going to ride us all to freedom. And I want to help improve it in every way I can. And that's what our project aims to do at the end. Really just supporting all decentralization, and also always starts with Bitcoin.
Excellent.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to add, Bitcoin to me it's a guarantee. It's a proof that we can now guarantee that you cannot censor transactions, right? We can transfer value and there is nothing you can do about it. Thank you very much, right? That is fundamental to freedom. And we have that. And Bitcoin is essentially it's over security centric, which is incredibly important for that layer, right? As a result, because it's over security centric, it has limitations and it always will do. And like Dan says, there'll be various side chains and technologies built on top of Bitcoin that help resolve some of those issues. From our point of view, with the social media generally is because it's likes and continuous uploads and high volume. You can't have high transaction fees. So what the technology that we're doing with Hive D+ blockchain and the Speak network does is it reduces the number of nodes. So it's not as overly secure as Bitcoin is, which is like equal nodage all over the world, and you have to get 51%. It's insane, insanely secure. But what this does is our system finds a balance where it's like now we can transact for free. We can do very fast transaction times, it's 3-second transaction times. And we can do all sorts of cool shit with the tokens and free to upload. If you want a low quality experience to guarantee your stuff gets uploaded, it's going to cost you slightly more to pay the miners, but it will never be on the scale of Bitcoin transactions. And then on top of that, we, like Dan was just saying, with DeFi now, we can allow Bitcoin to be transacted on these networks for free, 0 fees. 3-second transaction times. It can go side by side with the Lightning Network. So Bitcoin to me is this kind of securitized, high value kind of guarantee of transfer of value and store of value as well. And then what you're going to have is these other chains that integrate various features of Bitcoin to allow Bitcoins to be transacted on them at much lower cost, much lower prices, and they'll provide slightly different services such as high volume, high throughput social media. And because I'm not a maximalist necessarily, I'm certainly a crypto maximalist, but I see the possibilities and the applications of various different chains for different factions of what we need to have a free society. And so, yeah, I mean, that's it to me.
It was a pleasure talking to you guys today. I hope I get to have you guys on again sometime, maybe in 6 months or something. We do it again, and I get an update on what you guys are up to and how everything's going.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Hang on one second. I'll say a proper goodbye. Thanks to everybody that listening today. I appreciate you guys' time.